Hello, my Ravenettes. Are you ready for the darkness? Because I am. So today we are going back into the subreddit r/no sleep. So sit back, relax, turn off the lights, and get comfortable because we're going to dive deep into the abyss of horror. Make sure you have your stuffed animals and your crucifix next to you. And you might want to sleep the lights on tonight. That Missing Boy by Do You See Them? You've seen them before. Everyone has. They intentionally get close, smile like your friend, and leave you with more than just a happy feeling. Sometimes they'd ask for directions or a cent or two, always with a polite smile. When people are happy, they're much more susceptible to suggestions and less attentive to the little things. They have that down pat. They know your coding, the old-time mechanisms that make your mind tick. They know more about you than you or anyone else ever will. Once in a while, people just disappear. Here one day, gone the next. Some are later found in various states of decomposition, mutilation. They're the lucky ones that got rejected from the program and got released. But none of them are seen alive again. Every day, people from all around the world disappear. It's so common, we ignore it, or trust the authorities to do what they do. They took a boy once. Detectives told me he took a drive at 4:28 Friday. Dad's station wagon to go to the groceries. Routine food run. Went missing for 4 days. The family called us in. We brought out the choppers, the dogs, search and rescue teams. His car was abandoned at the edge of a lake. A bottle of prescription pills in the glove box. No DNA anywhere. It was cleaner than if it had been freshly printed off an assembly line less than a second prior by cold machines. Dogs can pick up a scent anywhere. Just kept leading the canine units in big, looping rounds around the car. Oddest thing was, there was a circle of dead animals around the vehicle, from tiny piles of ants to a whole squirrel, its skeleton lying pristine in front of the bumper, arranged like a high school science class dissection, neat and bleach white. Finally found his body at the bottom of a river delta, Monday, silted up, like he'd been lying there for years. We only found him because someone fell over the side of a search boat. I was next to the man, made a grab for him, and as he fell into the water, missed. I wonder how it would have been if I had caught him. A second later, he popped up again, treading water, pale and silent, hands shaking. At the time, I chalked it up to the shock of finding the boy's body by such a manner. Falling on a corpse isn't something people wish to experience. Now that I look back, I remember how fast he fell. No, was pulled down. Much faster than should have been possible with gravity. And his face. 2 days after finding the boy, he resigned, turned in his badge and gun, turned and walked out of the office and passed me out the door. Never saw him again. I went to his door with a case of beer to send him off 4 days later. The apartment was empty. The landlord told me it had been empty for 6 days. Last she saw the man was when he handed in his rent for the past month, Monday. I asked her when, and she told me around 10 p.m. We found the body at exactly 9:54 p.m. that day. It's written on the report. Filing number RL 1771-8 if you want to go into the office and flip back into the cabinets. The key is between a brick and the wall, and that will unlock the door. The chief's office is unlocked. Last cabinet to your right, bottom drawer. That's hardly the most perplexing thing of the entire thing. I saw the body before it was pulled out of the lake. The man's fall had revealed the boy's face, and I mistook it for living flesh when my flashlight first lit it up in the depths. His body was not bloated, nor decomposed. There's a light flush on his cheeks, and if not for his eyes, I would have imagined he was just lying in the bottom, holding his breath to compete with his brothers and sisters. But his eyes were open, but gone. Some fish had probably made off with them. I yelled for the nets, and they brought the body. I didn't see him when he came up out of that inky, dark water, but I smelled him, and I heard his flesh slide through the gaps of the net, falling back into the water until the nets only had held his head and some of his more stubborn parts. I'm looking through the pictures I took of the report and the pictures they took that night. It's not him, I guarantee it. There's a sliver of moon that night. I remember it shining dimly. In the pictures, there's no moon, a full, intact body, and no me. I was in the team of boats that came back to shore with the rest of the boy in a bag. I remember the sounds of whirring, clicking cameras, of flashes that blinded. Looking back, it's like someone went back and edited me out, replaced the boy with another dead body. I don't know what they did to the real body, or whose body they replaced his with, but he's not lying in a graveyard under his name. Did that give you the shivers? I hope it did. Because we're going to go even deeper. We're going to go to the one that's probably a bit overused. I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. By Search and Rescue Woods. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been an SAR officer for a few years now, and along the way, I've seen some things I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path, or slip down a small cliff and can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases that get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds. In that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly. When we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man, and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and had a weird face. We searched the area for weeks. It's one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. They waited at the base of a tree. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she just never came back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere. We never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she possibly could have gone, because neither her mother or her grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own searching with the canine. They've tried to lead me straight up cliffs, not hills, not even rock faces, sheer, straight cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling. In those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what had happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she had been let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another SAR officer that she killed herself a few weeks later after it happened. She just couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to figure out where he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevasse with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was obviously very infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he got to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, he was just wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain, letting out these horrible, muffled screams. The story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved a search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large, rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries. We were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling to the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how to describe it. When we were within sight of base off, someone turned to me, and her eyes were about as wide as I can imagine humans could open them. She touched my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on the neck." Now, I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say, I was really happy when we left the area that night. This is the last one I'll tell. It's probably the weirdest story I know. I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken, regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors. At this point, we've all gotten so used to it, that doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about the first time I saw some. The other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell some of them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, please let me know. That was part 1, and now we're going into part 2. I hope you're ready for this. I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service, and I have some stories to tell. By Search and Rescue. So I logged back on tonight, and I was blown away by the staggering amount of interest this seems to have generated. First off, I'll address a few things that you guys have brought up. There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning similarity between some of my stories and those of Dave Paulides. I assure you, I'm not trying to rip him off in any way. I've got nothing but respect for the guy. He's actually what inspired me to write this, because I can verify a lot of the things he talks about. We do have a lot of these strange missing persons cases. Most of the time, they aren't solved. Either that, or we find them in places they have no business being. I personally haven't been on many calls like that, but I'll share a few that I've seen, and the story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on them briefly here, and I'll also include a story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and conditions. Some are pretty dilapidated, just ruins, but others are brand new. I came across one set that looked like they came from a lighthouse. They were metal and spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go up indefinitely, or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before, just imagine the stairs in your house as if someone cut and pasted them in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any pictures. It's never really occurred to me to try after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my job over it. I'll try again in the future, but I can't promise anything. A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran to Man with No Face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of this peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants. This was the Man with No Face. Sorry about the confusing wording in that story. I'll try to avoid that in the future. Alright, on to news stories. As far as missing persons goes, I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls. People who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You wouldn't believe how often this happens, mostly drunk kids. Get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team. We have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting for all of us, because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it'd be okay to go out alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing, because past a certain point, it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out in standard search formation. It wasn't long before one of our vets found signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in a fan to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us all head back to the vet's location, and we come right away. Because this usually means the missing person is injured and we need a full team to help get them out safely. We met back up, and the vet is just standing at the base of the tree, his hands on the side of his head. I asked my buddy what's going on, and he points up to the branches of the tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. But there is a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle had been looped around the branch and is just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it that far. You don't see any other signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. All just sort of left scratching our heads. We kept searching for the guy, but we never found him. We even brought our canines out. They lose the scent long before this tree. Eventually, the search is called off, because there are other calls we have to attend, and past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we found her husband, and it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That and the questions that were raised. How the hell did this guy's cane end up there? Did someone kill him and toss that up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still talk about that one from time to time. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under, it's never easy. And we always, always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks a lot about kids SAR teams find in places they shouldn't or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones I think about a lot that I have witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that had a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs up their stuff, and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost in the parking area to it unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her. When she hears it sounds like someone coming up in the path behind her, she turns around. In the 4 or so seconds her head is turned, when she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figured he'd stepped off the trail to pee or something. Then she asked her other 2 where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seemed like they had been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy, so of course, she freaks out. Starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming his name. She says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously, she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police and they send us out immediately. We respond and start the search for him. Over the course of the search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of this kid. Canines can't pick up any scent. We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We looked for this kid for weeks, with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually, the search peters out, and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching, though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body had been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid, but we go out there about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I've been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area, because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of this tall, rocky slope, and halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy, stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognized the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that's a missing boy. That's when he calls it in, and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard even for us that are climbing gear. 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid didn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty. So it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there, from what we can tell. He hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for at most a day or 2. The whole thing was unbelievably strange, and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've ever been on. We found out later the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He's frozen to death, probably late at night, 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects, and no answers. To date, it's one of the weirdest things I've seen. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This is one of the first those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail and we saw clear signs that he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about half a mile from where he'd been last seen. The kid wasn't even aware he'd wandered that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm not really good with kids, and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As our trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail. People usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there. It's a few miles away. We get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area and she's pointing out places she's found people in the past, I see something in the distance. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state protected land, which means there can't be any sort of commercial or residential development out here. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or a makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here that whatever this thing is has straight edges, and if there's one thing you learn quickly, is that nature never makes straight lines. I pointed out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's a staircase in the middle of the fucking woods! In proper context, it would literally be the most benign thing ever. It's just a normal staircase with beige carpet and about 10 steps tall. Instead of being in a house, where it obviously should be, it's out here, in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I can see the wood it's made out of. It's almost like a video game glitch, where the house had failed to load completely and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there, and it's like my brain is working overtime trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me, and she just stands there casually, looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. Ask her what the fuck this thing is doing here, and she just chuckles. Get used to it, rookie. You're gonna see a lot of them. I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm, hard. I wouldn't do that, she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there, looking at her. You're gonna see them all the time, but don't go near them, don't touch them, don't go up them, just ignore them. I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right, though. I'd say about every 5th call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere. I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in great condition, but sometimes it looks like they've been out there for miles. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion, and were at least 10 feet wide, with steps leading at least 15 or 20 feet. I've tried talking about it with people, but they just give me the same reason my trainer did. It's normal. Don't worry about it. They're not a big deal, but don't go close to them or up them. When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it just hasn't happened yet. This is another one that was less spooky and more sad. A young man went missing late in the winter, when realistically no one should be going out that far into the trails. We close a lot of them, but some remain open year-round, unless there's a shitload of snow. We didn't opt for him, but we had about 6 feet of snow on the ground. It was an unusually heavy snow year. We knew it wasn't likely that we'd find him until spring when the thaw came. Sure enough, when the first big thaw came, a hiker reported a body a little ways off the main trail. We found him at the base of a tree, in a pile of melted snow. I knew right away what had happened, and it scared the living shit out of me. Most of you who ski or snowboard or spend any amount of time on a mountain will probably have guessed too. When snow falls, it doesn't collect as thick in the areas beneath the branches. It happens most with fir trees, because they have a sort of closed umbrella shape. So what you end up with is a space around the base of a tree that's filled with a mixture of loose, powdery snow, air, and branches. They're called tree wells. They're not immediately obvious if you don't know what you're looking for. We put up signs in the Welcome Center, big ones, letting people know how dangerous they are. But every year, when we get unusual mountain snow, at least one person doesn't read them or doesn't take the warning seriously, and we find out about it in the spring. My best guess is that this young man was hiking and got tired or maybe cramped from walking in the deep snow. He went in to go sit at the base of the tree, and, not knowing there was a tree well, and fell in. He got stuck with his feet up, and the surrounding snow caved in around him. Unable to free himself, he suffocated. It's called snow immersion suffocation, and it doesn't usually happen except in really deep snow. But if you get stuck in a weird position, like this guy did, even 6 feet of snow can be lethal. What scared me the most was imagining how he must have struggled. Upside down in the freezing cold, he didn't die quickly. The snow would have formed a dense, heavy pile on top of him, and it would have been literally impossible to get out of. As it got harder to breathe, he would have known what was happening. I can't even imagine thinking what his last moments were. A lot of my less outdoorsy friends want to know if I've ever seen the Goat Man while out on calls. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've never had anything quite like that happen. I guess the closest was the whole black-eyed man thing. I didn't see anything. However, there was one call where I had something kind of similar happen. But I'm not sure I'm willing to chalk it up to the Goat Man. We got a report that an older woman had fainted along the trails and needed assistance getting back to the main area. We hike up to where she's at, and her husband is just beside himself. He runs, well, I guess more jogs, to us and tells us that she was a little ways off the trail looking at something when his wife started screaming behind him. He runs back to her and she passed out on the trail. We get her on a backboard, and as we're getting her down to the welcome center, she comes to and starts screaming again. I calm her down and ask her what happened. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but essentially what she said was this. She'd been waiting for her husband when she started hearing this really strange sound. She said it sounded sort of like a cat, but was off somehow, and she couldn't quite figure out why. She went a little ahead to try and hear better, and it sounded like it was coming closer. She said the closer it got, the more uneasy she was until she finally figured out what was wrong. I do remember this next part because it was so weird that I don't think I could ever forget it, even if I tried. It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying the word meow over and over, just meow, meow, meow. But it wasn't a man. It couldn't have been, because I've never heard a man make his voice buzz like that. I thought my hearing aid was going out, but it wasn't. I adjusted it and it still sounded all buzzy. It was awful. He was coming closer and I couldn't see him, and going out, but I thought my hearing aid was going out, but it wasn't. I just adjusted it. It still sounded all buzzy. He was coming closer, but I couldn't see him, and the closer he got, the more scared I was. The last thing I remember was a shape coming out of the trees. I guess that's when I fainted. Now, obviously, I'm a little perplexed as to why you gotta be out in the fucking woods chanting meow, meow at people. So once we get down the mountain, I tell my superior that I'm gonna search the area to see if I can find anything. He gives me the go-ahead, and I grab a radio and hike back to where she fainted. I don't see anyone, so I keep going about a mile more. And when I head back, I go off the trail to see if I can figure out where she saw him coming from. It's almost sunset by this point, and I don't have any desire to be out at night alone. So I just sort of write it off, make a mental note, check it again tomorrow. But as I'm headed back, I start to hear something in the distance. I stop and call out for anyone in the immediate area to identify themselves. The sound didn't come closer or get louder, but it sounded exactly like a man saying, meow, meow. This really odd monotone. As comical as it may sound, it was almost like that guy in South Park with the electrolarynx, Ned. I go off the trail in the direction I think it's coming from, but I never seem to get closer. It's like it's almost coming from all directions. Eventually it just sort of fades out, and I end up going back to Welcome Center. Didn't get any further reports like that, and even though I went back to that area, I've never heard that exact same sound again. I suppose it could have been some stupid kid out there fucking with people, but even then I have to admit, it was weird. So this kind of turned into a massive wall of text, and for that, I apologize. I wanted to get to the stories my friend told me. It does have some good ones, so I'll post those tomorrow evening. I also have a few more of my own I think you guys will like. I'm starting to keep you all in suspense again. Hopefully the stories here make up for it, and will help you get through the next 24 hours until I can post again. Edit. So it seems like all of you would like to hear more. Tomorrow, I'll write up as many stories as I can and do a massive post. I'll include my friend's stories, and I'll see if I can't get a hold of a few more people who might have interested things to talk about. I just wasn't sure how people felt about huge walls of text, but if you're all okay with it, I'll post lots of stories. And that is it for today, my lovely Ravenettes. And I do hope you enjoyed that. I will be coming back to the series in the next video, and I hope your dreams are full of nightmares.